So I mentioned in the opening that to put together this event, to create and produce this whole event, we've been really fortunate to have the support across all our company. And we had the chance to open this morning with Simon Seegers, our CEO, and tonight we have the chance to close this first day of celebration with Abbey, who is our Senior Vice President of Sales and Partner Enablement. So with no further ado, I would like to welcome Abbey to lead this last panel.
Oh, thank you, Kate. I have a confession to make, a real confession. In the late 90s, I started my career as a developer. And some of the guys in the room that have known me for such a long time are probably thinking, I can't believe that Will was actually a developer working for a living. I spent the very first 6 years of my life in a cube writing algorithms on DSPs to solve speech and imaging applications. And the hours were long, and back in the 90s, we didn't get free lunch, right? Nor did we get drinks. I had to bring my own drink, and I had to pay for my own lunch. But I learned a lot, made a ton of mistakes. I worked with a bunch of inspiring people. And as a consequence of that, I got a great insight into what technology is all about. And then one day, some guy said, he's pretty good with customers, Will. Well, let's get him out to start to interface with some of our partners. And for the last, I don't know, 15, 16 years, I've been immersed in mostly commercial roles, from product marketing, product management, to business development, to a general manager of a business line within Arm, which I ran for 3.5 years. And I now find myself sort of running sales and partner enablement. So Arm is an IP company, as most of you know. So most of the commercial out-facing teams report to me. So, many of you guys in the room have probably had a member of my team interfacing with you. And essentially, from the hyperscalers developing technology in the cloud to network operators to small, 3-4-man teams creating applications that are hopefully going to transform the world, those teams report to me. So we deeply collaborate and partner with our ecosystem of customers to really make a difference. I do fundamentally believe that technology, it's at its best when it puts people front and center. So technology, it's at its best when it's transforming lives. And I've been told to talk a little bit about myself, so I hate doing this, but I'm going to tell you a little story about a trip that I took to Kenya. Simon this morning talked about the second wave of groups of individuals from Arm that have partnered with UNICEF to kind of parachute themselves into a local context to see real world needs and to see how technology can make a difference. And 2016, a boy that grew up in Ghana a long time ago. By the way, if you've never been to Ghana, I strongly recommend that you do that. Beautiful country. People are great. Food is also amazing. But I found myself in Kenya for the very first time in Nairobi, outside of an informal settlement. For you and I, that's a slum, but they glamify the term. 700,000 individuals living in corrugated steel housing. If you can just imagine, hugely dense environment, no running water. Toilet was nowhere to be seen, and these young families are living there and working in Nairobi. And the thing that struck me as being really powerful is, if you can imagine this hugely dense environment, as I said, 700,000 individuals living there day in and day out. Electricity is, you've got wires coming in from the grid going into people's homes. Families are cooking food with kerosene heaters. You can just imagine the kind of environment it is. And so what blew me away was the fact that UNICEF, the Red Cross and ARM essentially had put together a network of sensors in all of these homes. And as a consequence of that, using LoRa technology, somebody in a control panel can see these homes, see these sensors, and if smoke or fire had started, they would dispatch a group of individuals who would direct people the right way to leave the slums. And it just got me thinking that that's technology at its best. And I had the privilege of talking to some of the young families as they explained to me what life was like before and what life is like after UNICEF and the Red Cross had come into town and used simple ARM technology with LoRa technology to make a real lasting impact on those individuals' lives. And so I walked away with a sense of pride because I work for ARM. And so that's enough about me. Let me just talk to you a little bit about the panel and the panelists. I'm going to invite them to join, and I'm going to be asking them some fairly, hopefully, interesting questions that you'll benefit from hearing their answers. But this panel isn't about diversity and inclusion. It is very cliche and rightly so. It's very topical and rightly so. And so for those individuals who are part of that conversation, I want to continue to encourage you to keep having those conversations. But this panel is more about the communities like the folks I just talked about in Kenya. The cultures that technology needs to do more for. Because as I said, when we put people at the center of tech, that's when tech becomes real. When use cases drive tech and tech's not driving use cases, I think that's when it becomes real. So without further ado, I'm going to ask two people to join me, an old friend and a new friend. An old friend, and I'm going to get kicked by calling her old, but I'm not saying you're old, but she's an old friend. I'm going to ask Blair Palmer to join me. Blair's from UNICEF. She's going to come up. Please give her a hand of applause.
What do you want?
Please take a seat.
Okay.
And my new friend is flown all the way from Kenya, 24 hours to be here, is Ciira Maina, all the way from the university in Kenya. Okay, please take a seat.
Thank you.
What's ironic is that Blair lives in San Francisco, and I think it's taken her 24 hours to get here this morning as well.
Pretty much.
So there's a use case for somebody. I think Google and Uber are trying to solve that problem anyway. So let's start off with my first question to my good friend.
Oh, thank you.
Ciira. So Data Science Africa.
Right.
What is that? What is it all about?
Thanks, Will, and thanks for having me here. So we've been talking a lot about AI, and I believe data is really at the center of AI. And one of the things we were really interested in is how to deploy AI solutions in Africa and have them solving people's problems, whatever those problems may be, or just creating interesting solutions. It doesn't have to be like a life-critical solution. But one of the things that we needed to do was really do a lot of capacity building training so that anybody who faces problems. So for example, here, a lot of the use cases that may be of interest here are things like self-driving cars, maybe speech recognition, etc. But there needs to be also diversity in the problems people solve. So people maybe in Kenya would be interested in a firefighting solution like you're talking about, or an agricultural solution like is shown in the picture here. And I believe what's right is for the people in this context, in Africa in this particular case, to have the knowledge to be able to tackle these problems using AI, which is now a fundamental tool. So hence Data Science Africa. And what we do is we have summer schools and workshops. And we started this in 2015. And since then, we've had 7 events in 6 countries. And what we really do is expose students to what we call the end-to-end of machine learning. Because often you can start doing machine learning with data sets from Kaggle or Zindi. But before you get nice, clean data, it's a long pipeline. Here we have engineers, so they are familiar with data, is interfacing the real world. So actually learning how to develop the systems that will be required to interface with the real world is critical, we think. So we've been having events all over Africa. We were just in Ghana last month. You should have been there.
I wish I was.
But so what we do is really hands-on work. So if you need to go into the greenhouse to collect soil temperature, soil moisture data, temperature data before you feed your time series models or whatever recurrent neural nets you want to feed, how does that data actually get to you? The whole pipeline. I had you mentioning LoRa. We do LoRa deployment. So it's really the entire spectrum. And we also, what we're really interested in doing is having real-world solutions. So for example, we have some deployments for ecosystem monitoring. So that will involve somebody like myself going into Mount Kenya National Park, into the forest, at threat of death, mounting sensors, collecting acoustic data, coming back to the lab, processing it. And we want students to have the liberty to be able to solve any problem they find interesting, whether it's really life-critical or just a problem that's important in our local context. So that's, in a nutshell, is Data Science Africa.
Ciira, thank you so much for that. It's amazing the work that you and your students are doing. I don't think I leave my house and I don't have to cross life-threatening situations to get to work. So I just want to commend you on the work that you and your team are doing. It's really amazing.
Yeah, thanks.
I'd like to turn my attention to you, Blair. So in your role at UNICEF, I know you've had the opportunity to fly into different contexts, in different time zones, different worlds. Just give us a flavor of the kind of problem areas that you and the team at UNICEF are working on.
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of what Ciira was saying, that we always think about how we can design with the communities and the issues that they're identifying. So we work with our country offices to figure out what those gaps are and where they exist, and then how maybe technology could help them. I say maybe, because it's not always the answer, right? And so all of our projects within innovation, but then also within programmatically that go into health, water and sanitation, et cetera, that scale, are driven by the demand of country offices. It's not some big, we'll say tech company X, saying, oh, can we use satellites in Rwanda? Or, oh, let's put this in Tanzania because we think it's cool. It's quite the opposite. It's really about what is the need and the gap there, and then how can we work with our country offices directly to figure out how that technology can be applied appropriately, and then also in a way that's effective. I always think about it in the sense that I've been to many countries all over the world in this work, and you can get there, and sometimes all the best laid plans, you're testing and testing and planning, and I'm in San Francisco, and we have teams in New York, or developers in Budapest, or wherever they are in the world, and then you get there and nothing connects, nothing works, the power goes out. You were with me. I mean, that happens so often that you can't always put that in your plan, I guess, and you know this. And so it's how do we make sure that we have projects that are not only locally managed, but that can sustain themselves in those settings and in the communities that we work. So it's those boots on the ground for us at UNICEF. And I know Kudus touched on it this morning, like we're everywhere, but without those boots on the ground, nothing would work, honestly. Like I really, really feel that it's the local communities that drive, especially innovation.
And I saw firsthand the work of the country officers and what they do. I remember a trip I took to Ghana in 2010. It was an amusing story. So an aunt that looked after me, I went back to Ghana in 2010, and I wanted to do something special for her to recognize that, what she'd done for me when I was a young boy growing up. And I watched the Sunday mornings washing with her hand, and so I said, Aunt, look, how about I buy you a washing machine? And she said to me, washing machine? Washing my husband's clothes, that's my joy. No machine's going to rob me of my joy. And so, it's a joke, right? But it's something that really happened and I really experienced. So the question that comes to my mind is that the country managers are the folks that really make a big difference, right? That implement the work of UNICEF on the ground. How receptive are the local communities to the implications of technology? That, you know, they don't really understand it, and it's there to solve a real world problem, but how receptive are the local people?
Well, I'll touch on a little bit what Kadus said this morning. One of the things that we do on our team, back to the principles he mentioned, was we always design for and with the user. And that means with the users, the end user, as he talked about, and those local communities. And sort of then, when thinking about that, what application of tech is best? So there's a lot of bright lights, but how many of you in this room have a mobile phone? Raise your hands. Oh, look, all of you, exactly. So why wouldn't we want to use what people are already using, right? So how do you then say, how do we take that mobile phone and make it more effective for those communities to not only maybe, say, address crisis response, but also then be a tool for prenatal care for mothers, for example. So we really think about the application of tech and how we design innovation. I'm doing air quotes, which we do all the time. How can we design for and with the end users that will make sure that it works, and that we make sure that we can then also transition to scale? I think it's nice if you create an idea, you know, even like the fire sensors project, but when that was thought about in Kenya, it was like, well, not only can it only work in Kibera, where else can it work? Can it work in other camps, you know, or slums within Kenya? Can it also work in Bangladesh? So we really try to think about how you can create things that are interoperable, ubiquitous, but then again, always designing with the end user. So the question becomes, it's not about inserting tech into something. It's about how can you use what people already have, maybe in a new and different way, to be able to apply something that would affect the community and create more impact.
Okay, thank you. So Ciira, you and I were talking about the farmers in Kenya.
Right.
You know, can you give me some examples of how receptive are they to, I won't use the word insertion, but I will anyway, insertion of tech, solving some of the problems that they come across day in and day out?
Yeah, I think farmers are an interesting group because they're very selective about the things they adopt. The things they adopt really must make a difference. So for example, in Kenya, there's this thing called M-Pesa, mobile money, which is really big. And it's a technology that once it was available, all farmers adopted it, you know, to make their payments and do things of that nature. So it was really useful tech meeting a need. So if the tech meets a need, the adoption is there. What often happens is like I've been doing a bit of work on IoT in agriculture. And there we've struggled a little bit because we have not yet, I think the problem is on us, the people who do the tech, is demonstrating the actual utility. So saying that, yes, you have this nice greenhouse, you're getting the products you're getting, but now if we make it a smart greenhouse, you'll get 10x. If you make that demonstration clear, anybody would take it up. So it's about actually showing the utility of the tech. So even in the communities I work with, like now the ecologists I collaborate with when we're doing ecosystem monitoring. So it's a long process of showing that, yes, you'd like to go and do your surveys to see how the ecosystem is doing manually, to go into the environment. But if we insert sensors into the forest, it would tell you the same information. So you really need to take the time to prove the utility of the tech.
Okay, you mentioned ecosystems at least twice in your answer.
Right.
And at ARM,
It's not an AI ecosystem.
It's an AI ecosystem.
No,
it's not.
It's a natural ecosystem.
Well, there you go. So it's interesting. So at ARM, we pride ourselves on the strength of the ecosystem, and many of the folks in the room today are part of the ARM ecosystem. So, what is an ecosystem for you in the context that you operate in? Could you just expand on that?
I guess, our ecosystem in terms of the tech ecosystem trying to solve problems in Kenya. So our ecosystem is very, I say top light. There are not too many experts.
Okay.
So what that has meant is that people who have expertise in machine learning end up being drawn into very many things. So you're organizing the community, you're trying to do your research, if you're a teacher like me, you're trying to teach. So that's one side, which we hope will change. But so we are drawn in very many directions. We're not able to focus. But it has a lot of enthusiastic students. So, and that's what gives me hope, because I think I even bumped to a few people from Senegal here who are doing interesting IoT deployments. So I believe the students are what keep us going in my particular ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. And Blair, same question to you from an ecosystem perspective. How important, and you've got a bunch of individuals here that are thinking deeply about some of the things that have been talked about today. So what advice would you give to many of the developers out there who are thinking about the ecosystems? Is there anything that you would share with them as they think about creating their own ecosystem, being part of an ecosystem?
I think from a private sector perspective, it's about maintaining the dialogue, right? So being in the companies you work in, or even from a personal perspective, how can you be a leader into creating, I guess, to go back to the topic of this panel, inclusive innovation, right? What does that mean? That means inclusive of like the local communities and the local actors that you were talking about. And how do you bring them into the fold? You're developing and coding, down in San Jose or Cambridge or wherever, you are in the world. But then how do you bring that community into the conversation? I think talent is universal, and it's about creating the opportunities for the people to also become involved. And for us, we also think that you can create profit alongside social impact. So how do you take that into your company and say, this matters, and these are our next markets? I think that's the ecosystem conversation that needs to be had. I mean, not only at ARM, but with your other, we'll use the word again, ecosystem partners. I think it's crucial that otherwise, innovation, all these like ideas, they go to this graveyard to die. We always say there's all these ideas, all the good tech for good stuff that just like sits out in some black hole somewhere, round file, as we affectionately call it sometimes. So how do you involve the communities to make sure it works and then it actually reaches the audience that needs it the most? I think that's a challenge, but that is a challenge that we know at UNICEF we can't do it alone. So the private sector is really good at getting things done. The development sector also is, but a lot slower. So how can you blend and marry the two to make sure that the people get what they need and want, as you mentioned, and then how do you just get stuff done? I mean, I think that is a crucial thing that you all and your ecosystem community can bring to the conversation.
Thank you, Blair. It brings me to my final question. I know that I think there's beer being served and some snacks, and it's been a long day, and some of you look like someone's already
We're in
cheering.
between us and the drinks.
So I'm going to ask one question, my last question, and then I know we have a few more minutes. So between the three of us walking off stage and you guys helping yourself to beer and food, if there's any question you'd like to ask Professor or Lady Blair, start thinking about the question. But my final question is this. Blair, you've had years of experience of seeing the application of technology being deployed in a local context and impacting lives. Can you give us some examples of where it's gone wrong and where it's landed well, and what makes it land well versus it not landing well at all?
I'll start by saying first, we're a tiny but mighty team at UNICEF of 30-some people that holds passports from over 20 countries. So there's that. So we do bring some context within our own team, but hearkening back to our country offices are crucial to the work we do. From an example standpoint of tech, and we were talking about this earlier, I know I sit here representing the Office of Innovation, but I really believe that shiny doesn't always mean better, especially in the context of the communities that we work. I think we really have to evaluate what's needed and how you apply it appropriately. For example, we work a lot like a startup, so it's fail fast, try different things, maybe new and differently, but like don't sit around and talk about it or waste a bunch of money, just go, just do it, right? But insofar as we've also failed at a lot of stuff. I mean, if this was a 2-hour panel, I would tell you about a lot of things that didn't work in the sort of tech for good space. And one example I'll give you is, so mHealth in Africa. UNICEF and our team helped create a project called Project Moana. which is based in Zambia. And it increased the time between when mothers could know whether or not their infants, their newborn babies, were infected with HIV from months to a matter of a week. And for example, that's one of the most successful mHealth interventions that's been deployed, but yet it has failed to scale beyond Zambia. And not because of the model, and there's been other things that have been tried, but for a lot of reasons that I won't go into. I mean, a lot of the non-sexy part of innovation is us sitting in conference rooms and like far-off places where you're like, oh my gosh, would the telco just like agree to this or what have you? And so I think that also becomes a huge challenge when you're trying to do this type of work in the world. You can develop the most beautiful AI, machine learning, IoT, whatever, and if the generator stops, none of it works, right? And you saw that when we were in Kenya. I mean, we were like, look at our sensors. And like, we go to power them, like 3 of them didn't work. And we were like, oh, but that's what happens, like things happen. So then what? So I think, again, I could talk about failure all day, and I'm happy to. We have fail fairs, at UNICEF as well. But I think it's about going back to what you said earlier. How can you put, at the root of humanitarian as a word is human. So I really feel like if you're going to do tech for the humanitarian sector or good, that you really need to start with humans first. I say this at an AIoT conference, I realize, but I don't think that we would be remiss if we forgot that piece of the technology space. So I'll end there, but yeah, happy to talk about what works and what didn't, but we have to get you to Ghana at some point too.
I'd love to. I'd love to. Thank you so much for that. So Ciira, my last question to you. So what advice would you give to some of these folks here that having spent the last, 8 hours here, feel passionate, they want to go off and create an app that solves some of the problems that many folks are experiencing in the developing world? Here's your audience. What advice are you going to give to them?
Well, advice is a very strong word, but what I would say is it's important to really get to know the context in which, and I know it's difficult from so far away, but it's possible in this digital age to know a bit more. For example, if you want to develop stuff for Malawi and floods, know where Malawi is, it's in Africa, but where in Africa? It's a lot of nuance. Getting to know the people and I think we are saying the same thing, the people are very important. Because maybe why it works in one place and not another is just because the people are different. And we have a lot of similarities, but there are also certain nuances. So it's important to know those nuances and also know that tech is not always a solution, and it may, and you may fail, and you will probably fail. So it's important to be patient and really try and understand that before you get to an ideal solution, it may take quite a bit of time. Right? Okay. Yeah.
And so we are indeed running out of time. And so on that note, I'd just like to thank you both for traveling 24 hours. And
more like 30.
Traveling what should have been 2 hours, yeah, but it's been a long day. So again, can we just show our appreciation for the panelists? I also want to thank you for your patience and your willingness to participate, because just the 3 of us talking to ourselves would not be fun. So again, thank you for staying in there. Hopefully you found something throughout this discussion or throughout the day that's sparked some creativity for you to go off and solve a real problem that really touches people's lives. Thank you. So I'm going to invite Kate to come back up and direct the folks to where they can grab a drink and some nibbles.
Yes, I'm the only thing standing between you and a beer right now. So thank you again for being here. We hope you enjoyed this first day. We'll see you again tomorrow at 9 a.m. for a keynote with Massimo Bonzi, the CTO and co-founder of Arduino. And now you're welcome to join us for a reception in the Grand Hall. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.